Hi everyone, welcome again to the series of lectures in the BPLJ channel on civil procedure. Our topic for today is preliminary attachment under Rule 57. Preliminary attachment is one of the provisional remedies provided by the rules to ensure that the winning party in any litigation will be assured that if judgment is rendered in his favor, the said judgment will be satisfied. Now, preliminary attachment is granted either upon the filing of the application ex parte or during the pendency of the action. However, there has to be a ground for the issuance of a preliminary attachment. Preliminary attachment may not issue unless it is one of the grounds provided under Section 1 of Rule 57. So when does preliminary attachment issue? At the commencement of the action or at any time before entry of judgment. So meaning, preliminary attachment is an adjunct to the main case. So it has to be issued either when the case is filed or during the pendency of the action. Once there is already a judgment and the judgment has already become final, executory, okay, the preliminary attachment necessarily will be considered as terminated. Okay? A plaintiff or any party may have property of the adverse party attached as security for the satisfaction of any judgment. So, you attach on the property of the defendant for the purpose of securing the satisfaction of judgment. Now, that preliminary attachment will issue on any of the following grounds. First, in an action for the recovery of a specified amount of money or damages. So it's a case for collection of sum of money or a case for damages. Other than moral and exemplary on a cause of action arising from law, contract, quasi-contract, delict or quasi-delict against a party who is about to depart from the Philippines with intent to defraud his creditors. So, scenario number 1 contemplates of a case for collection of sum of money or a case for damages, and the defendant is about to leave the Philippines for the purpose of defrauding his creditors. Second scenario or second ground, in an action for money or property embezzled or fraudulently misapplied or converted to his own use by a public officer or an officer of a corporation or an attorney, factor, broker, agent, or clerk in the course of his employment or by any other person in a fiduciary capacity or for willful violation of duty. Third ground, in an action to recover the possession of property unjustly or fraudulently taken, detained and converted when the property or any part thereof has been concealed, removed, or disposed of, to prevent its being found or taken by the applicant or an authorized person. So, the first scenario is an action for recovery of sum of money or damages. The third scenario is an action for the recovery of possession of property. Fourth scenario, in an action against a party who has been guilty of fraud in contracting the debt or incurring the obligation upon which the action is brought or in the performance thereof. Fifth, in an action against the party was removed or disposed of his property or is about to do so with intent to defraud his creditors. And last, in an action against the party who does not reside or and is not found in the Philippines or on whom summons may be served by publication. Okay, if you will notice in all the grounds, um, for preliminary attachment, for the issuance of preliminary attachment, fraud is present. So from A to E, okay, the fraud must be particularly alleged or stated in the complaint and in the affidavit in support of the preliminary attachment. Okay. The primary requirements, the formal requirements for the issuance of a preliminary attachment are two. Okay, first is the execution of an affidavit stating with particularly the ground relied upon for the issuance of an attachment and the posting of a bond. The bond is posted in order to ensure the defendant that he will be properly indemnified in case it was found later on that there is really no reason for the issuance of an attachment. Okay. An order of attachment may be issued either ex parte or upon motion with notice and hearing by the court in which the action is pending. Okay? So, attachment, the writ of preliminary attachment may issue even if there is no hearing. It may be issued ex parte as long as all the requirements are present. Okay? An affidavit is executed by the applicant. The ground is one of those stated under Section 1 of Rule 57. The corresponding bond is filed by the applicant. Okay? An order of attachment shall be granted only when it appears by affidavit of the applicant or of some other person who personally knows the facts that a sufficient cause of action exists, that the case is one of those mentioned in Section 1, that there is no other sufficient security for the claim sought to be enforced by the action, and that the amount due the applicant or the value of the property in the possession of which he is entitled to recover is as much as the sum for which the order is granted. Now, what is the condition of the applicant's bond? The party applying for the order must give a bond executed to the adverse party in the amount fixed by the court. If the to answer for the damages, if the court shall finally adjudge that the applicant was not entitled thereto. Okay. So how do you discharge the attachment? If you are the defendant and your property has been the subject of a preliminary attachment, because you see, when a property is subjected to preliminary attachment, okay, it becomes in the custody, the effect of which is it becomes in custodia legis or in the custody of the court. Okay? The property will be placed under the custody of the court to answer or to serve as a security, okay, for the satisfaction of the judgment. Okay, so what do you do if you are the defendant in an action wherein there is an application for preliminary attachment? Okay, the sheriff enforcing the writ shall without delay and with reasonable diligence attach to await the judgment and execution only so much of the property of the party against whom the writ is issued, not exempt from execution, as may be sufficient to pay the applicant's demand, unless the former makes a deposit with the court from which the writ is issued or gives a counter bond executed to the applicant in an amount equal to the bond fixed by the court in the order of the attachment. So there are two ways of discharging the attachment through the filing of a counter bond. Either you file a counter bond or you make a cash deposit to answer for the amount that will later on be adjudged by the court in the judgment. Okay. Discharge of the attachment upon giving of a counter bond. After a writ of attachment has been enforced, the party whose property has been attached may move for the discharge of the attachment. The court shall, after due notice and hearing, order the discharge of the attachment if the movant makes a cash deposit or files a counter bond executed to the attaching party in an amount to be fixed by the court. So in such a case, the property attached shall be delivered to the party making the deposit or giving the counter bond. So that is one way of discharging or annulling the preliminary attachment, giving of a cash deposit or a counter bond. Okay. Now, are these the only ways by which attachment could be discharged? The answer is no. Attachment may also be discharged on other grounds. Now, what are those grounds? The party whose property has been ordered attached may file a motion for an order to set aside or discharge the attachment on the ground that the same was improperly or irregularly issued or enforced. So these are two different things, improper or irregular issuance or enforcement. When you say improper or irregular issuance, it may refer to the propriety of the issuance of the writ of attachment, that it is not one of those grounds provided for under Section 1 of Rule 57. Because if, for example, it is not one of those specified under Section 1 of Rule 57, like, for example, fraud was not particularly alleged and proved, okay, then preliminary attachment is improper. Okay? And enforcement. If the attachment was not properly enforced, then it may also be discharged or that the bond is insufficient. Okay? You can also object to the issuance of an attachment on the ground that the bond filed by the applicant is not sufficient to answer for the damages that may be caused to the defendant by reason of the attachment. In such a case, the court may issue an order increasing the bond, and the applicant must have to pay the deficiency in the bond in order to maintain the validity of the attachment. Okay, so after due notice and hearing, the court shall order the setting aside or the corresponding discharge of the attachment if it appears that it was improperly or irregularly issued or enforced, or that the bond is insufficient, or that the attachment is excessive. What if there are other persons or third persons claiming the property to be attached? Section 14 of Rule 57 states that if the property attached is claimed by any person other than the party against whom the attachment had been issued, such person must make an affidavit of his title or the right to possession stating the grounds for such right or title. And in such a case, the sheriff will not be bound to keep the property under attachment unless the applicant files a bond, okay, which is designed to compensate that third person for any damages that he may suffer by reason of the issuance of the attachment. Okay. Again, attachment is a provisional remedy issued by the court where the action is pending to levy upon the property of the defendant as security for the satisfaction of the judgment. Okay, it may be issued in any of the following cases. And as I mentioned a while ago, it is very important to allege with particularity the fraud. Okay, because a writ of preliminary attachment will not issue unless the affidavit filed in support thereof states with particularity the fraud that was committed. Okay? It may issue in an action for recovery of money and damages against the party who is about to depart from the Philippines with intent to defraud creditors, in an action for money or property embezzled or fraudulently misapplied, in an action to recover the possession of property unjustly or fraudulently taken or converted when the property has been concealed, removed, or disposed, in an action against a party who is guilty of fraud in contracting a debt, and in an action against the party who has removed or disposed of his property or is about to do so with intent to defraud creditors, and in an action wherein the defendant could not be served with summons personally and can only be served with summons by publication. Okay? Uh, we have the case of Cuartero versus Court of Appeals. So in this case, Cuartero filed a complaint for collection of sum of money with damages, with prayer for the issuance of a writ of preliminary attachment. So the trial court issued the writ ex parte. Now, the defendant, Spouses Evangelista, filed a motion to set aside the order and discharge the writ of preliminary attachment because it was irregularly and improperly issued. The Supreme Court said the only requisites for the issuance of the writ are the affidavit and bond. No notice to the adverse party or hearing of the application is required, inasmuch as the time which the hearing will take could be enough to enable the defendant to abscond or dispose of his property before a writ of attachment issues. That is the reason why the rules allow the issuance of a writ of preliminary attachment ex parte. So meaning without the requirement of notice and hearing to the defendant because it is a matter of urgency. The defendant is already disposing the property or concealing the property. And that is the reason why as long as the affidavit and bond are complied with, the court may issue the writ of preliminary attachment ex parte. The commencement of the action is interpreted as referring to the date of the filing of the complaint, which is a time before summons is served. So it can be issued even before summons is served to the defendant. Okay? Levy on property pursuant to the writ may not be validly effected unless preceded or contemporaneously accompanied by service on the defendant of summons. So actually there are three stages in the issuance of the writ of preliminary attachment. First is the issuance. So the court issues an order granting the writ. Second, the writ of attachment issues pursuant to the order granting the writ. And third is the implementation of the writ of attachment. So the sheriff goes to the property and serves the writ of attachment to the defendant. So for the initial two stages, it is not necessary that jurisdiction over the person of the defendant is obtained. However, once the implementation commences, it is required that the court must have acquired jurisdiction over the defendant. So, upon the levy, okay, on the property subject of the attachment, this sheriff will contemporaneously or simultaneously serve the summons to the defendant. But the issuance of the writ of attachment may be made ex parte without giving due notice and hearing to the defendant. Again, the reason for this is that it is a matter of urgency and the defendant, according to the affidavit, is already disposing or damaging the property. We now go to the case of Mount Banahaw Wood versus Naga Dynasty. This is a complaint for collection of sum of money with prayer for a writ of preliminary attachment against Naga dynasty. Naga purchased from Banahaw plywood products, okay, and for which post-dated checks were issued. Now, claiming that it has a valid and meritorious cause of action, Naga, with the intent to defraud, were already in the process of disposing their properties. So Banahaw prayed for the issuance of a writ of preliminary attachment. So the writ was issued by the trial court, but the same was dissolved by the Court of Appeals. According to the CA, the factual circumstances of fraud must be sufficiently shown. Okay, fraud is defined as the voluntary execution of a wrongful act. Fraudulent intent is not a physical entity, but a condition of the mind beyond the reach of the senses, usually kept secret, very unlikely to be confessed, and can be proved by unguarded expressions, conduct, and circumstances. In an application for the issuance of a writ of preliminary attachment, it is necessary to recite, in particular, um, the how the applicant was defrauded. The particulars of such circumstances necessarily include time, persons, places, and specific acts of fraud committed. The particularities on how respondents defrauded petitioner, whether in contracting or performing the obligation or in removing or disposing their properties, were missing. So fraudulent intent cannot be inferred from the debtor's mere non-payment of the debt or failure to comply with his obligation. As I was emphasizing a while ago, fraud is an indispensable requirement for the issuance of a writ of preliminary attachment. And it is required that the particularities by which fraud was committed must be alleged both in the application, in the petition, as well as in the affidavit. So the applicant must show how the fraud was committed. And mere non-payment of a debt does not necessarily prove fraud. Okay, we now go to the case of Dumaran versus Liamedo. So in this case, Dumaran filed a complaint for sum of money with prayer for a writ of preliminary attachment. Okay, so this case arose from the purchase on credit of diesel and gasoline fuel, okay, using as means of payment post-dated checks. Okay, so it was alleged also that Liamedo failed to pay the total outstanding obligation. The trial court issued a writ of attachment, but it was dissolved by the Court of Appeals. According to the Court of Appeals, the complaint and affidavit did not specifically show how the wrongful acts of Liamedo knowingly committed to deceive Dumaran to enter into the contract or to perform the obligation. It lacked the particulars of time, persons, and places to support the serious assertions that Yamedo was disposing of his properties to defraud Dumaran. Being a state of mind, fraud cannot merely be inferred from a bare allegation of non-payment of debt or non-performance of the obligation. And also, in the case of Dumaran, the Supreme Court said that if the ground for the discharge of the attachment is irregular or improper issuance, okay, a counter bond is not required. Okay? Under Rule 57, there are two remedies of a party to discharge an attachment. Okay? First is to make a cash deposit equal to the claim or give a counter bond. Second, file a motion to discharge the attachment on the following grounds: improper or irregular issuance, improper or irregular enforcement, that the bond of the plaintiff is insufficient. For the second remedy to apply, a writ of attachment may be discharged without filing a cash bond or a counter bond only if the writ of preliminary attachment itself has already been proven to be improperly or irregularly issued or the bond is insufficient. Uh, what are the requisites for preliminary attachment? As discussed a while ago, it may issue upon filing of the complaint or at any time before uh, before issuance, before the judgment becomes final. Okay, so it may be made by motion, filed at any time before entry of judgment. The formal requisites, affidavit of merit, and filing of a bond. Okay? A sufficient cause of action exists, which should be one of those grounds stated under Section 1 of Rule 57. There is no other sufficient security for the claim sought to be enforced, and that the amount due the applicant or the value of the property is equal to that for which the order would be granted above all counterclaims. Fraudulent intent must be particularly shown and proved. Okay, let's go to the cases. Security Bank Corporation versus Great Wall. So in this case, Security Bank filed a complaint for sum of money with application for the writ against Great Wall to recover their unpaid obligations under a credit facility. The RTC granted the writ. Now, the respondents filed a motion to lift the writ of preliminary attachment, claiming that the writ was issued with grave abuse of discretion. Okay, the CA lifted the writ of preliminary attachment. The issue is whether or not the CA erred in nullifying the writ issued by the trial. Again, the Supreme Court reiterated that the provisional remedy of attachment is available in order that the defendant may not dispose of the property attached and thus prevent the satisfaction of any judgment that may be secured by the plaintiff from the form. The applicant must sufficiently show the factual circumstances of the fraud. It is settled that fraudulent intent cannot be inferred from the debtor's mere non-payment of the debt or failure to comply with his obligation. While fraud cannot be presumed, it need not be proved by direct evidence, but it is necessary that it be proven, in many cases, by inferences from circumstances shown to have been involved in the transaction. So in this case, the Supreme Court held that Security Bank was able to substantiate its factual allegation of fraud, particularly the violation of the trust receipts agreements to warrant the issuance of the writ. Hence, the same cannot be said with respect to the violation of the trust receipt agreements. Hence, the fraud committed in the performance of the obligation was included as a ground for the issuance of preliminary attachment. The fraud committed by the respondents in the performance of the obligation should have been considered by the Court of Appeals. In this case, Security Bank, knowing fully well that they were in default, submitted a repayment proposal. Then they requested a meeting with the bank to discuss their proposal. And for unknown reasons, they did not meet the representatives of Security Bank. And this was considered by the Supreme Court as sufficient indication of fraud. We now go to the case of Watercraft Venture versus Wolf. So in this case, Watercraft filed against Wolf a complaint for collection of some money with damages with application for the writ, and the RTC granted the writ. Wolf filed a motion to discharge the writ of attachment, arguing that Watercraft failed to show the existence of fraud. The RTC denied Wolf's motion. The Supreme Court said Preliminary attachment should be resorted to only when necessary and as a last remedy because it exposes the debtor to humiliation and annoyance. It must be granted only on concrete and specific grounds and not merely on general averments, quoting the words of the rules. Since attachment is harsh, extraordinary, and summary, the rules on the application of a writ must be strictly construed against the defendant. So in this case, the mere filing of an affidavit reciting the facts is not enough to compel the judge to grant the writ. The sufficiency or insufficiency of an affidavit depends upon the amount of credit given to it by the judge and its acceptance or rejection upon his sound discretion. So in this case, Watercraft failed to state with particularity the circumstances constituting fraud. Wolf's mere failure to pay the boat's storage fees does not necessarily amount to fraud, absent any showing that such failure was due to insidious machinations. So the mere failure to pay the debt, failure to pay the boat's storage fees does not necessarily indicate fraud. The applicant for a writ of preliminary attachment must sufficiently show the factual circumstances of the fraud because fraudulent intent cannot be inferred from the debtor's mere non-payment of the debt or failure to comply with his obligation. The particulars of such circumstances necessarily include time, persons, places, and specific acts of fraud committed. An affidavit which does not contain concrete and specific grounds is inadequate to sustain the issuance of the writ. So if you will notice in those series of cases, the Supreme Court consistently reiterated for the applicant for the writ of preliminary attachment to issue, it is indispensable that the applicant must allege with particularly how the fraud was committed. We now go to the case of Jardine Manila Finance versus Court of Appeals. In this case, Impact assigned its receivables to Jardine on the condition that Impact was to collect them and remit the collected amounts to Jardine. However, Impact failed or refused to turn over the amounts collected to Jardine. So Jardine filed a complaint against Impact to collect various sums of money, coupled with an application for the writ. Although the trial court granted the writ, the defendants filed a motion to set aside the writ on the ground that there was no affidavit of merit. Now, the issue is whether or not non-compliance with the formal requirements invalidate the writ of attachment. Okay, again, what are the formal requirements for the issuance of the writ? First is the execution of an affidavit of merit and the filing of a bond. The failure to allege in the affidavit the requisites prescribed for the issuance of the writ renders the writ issued against the property fatally defective, and the judge issuing it is deemed to have acted in excess of jurisdiction. Since the attachment is a harsh remedy which exposes the debtor to humiliation and annoyance, the rule authorizing its issuance must be strictly construed in favor of the defendant. It is the duty of the court before issuing the writ to ensure that all of the requisites of the law have been complied with. Affidavit is the foundation of the writ, and if there is none filed, or if the one filed fails to set out some facts required by law, there is no jurisdiction and the proceedings are null and void. So non-compliance with the formal requirements is a jurisdictional effect. Gruenberg versus CA. In this case, Flores as a claimant for 13,000 pesos against the estate of Gruenberg was appointed as administrator of the estate of the deceased, while the respondent filed a motion in her capacity as administrator of Gruenberg's estate. The motion for a writ of attachment and its supporting affidavit show that the attachment was intended to secure only her 13,000 claim against the estate. Obviously, this cannot be done. A writ of attachment is a remedy ancillary to the principal proceeding. Its purpose is to secure the outcome of the trial. The purpose behind the filing of the complaint was to recover a piece of property belonging to the intestate estate of the deceased. Any writ of attachment necessary to secure the judgment must be related to the protection of the estate. The writ may not issue if only to protect the personal interests of the respondent as a creditor of the estate. So the private respondent's remedy is to file it as a claim under Rule 86 as a claim against the estate. The rules on the issuance of a writ of attachment must be construed strictly in favor of the defendant. The remedy of attachment is harsh. If all the requisites for the issuance of the writ are not present, the court which issues it acts in excess of its jurisdiction. Okay. Now we go to attachment bond as well as discharge of attachment. Remember that no attachment may issue unless the applicant gives a deposit or a bond in an amount equal to that fixed in the order, which is sufficient to satisfy the applicant's demand. The attachment bond is executed in favor of the defendant to pay all the cost and damages that he may sustain by reason of the attachment. In order to stay or annul the writ, okay, it is necessary for the defendant to give a counter bond executed in favor of the applicant equal to the bond fixed by the court or the value of the property to be attached. Okay, he may also move for the discharge of the attachment on the ground that it was improperly or irregularly issued or that the bond was insufficient. We have the case of Coca-Cola FEMSA versus Pacific Sugar. So in this case, the parties entered into a supply agreement for the delivery of sugar. However, Pacific Sugar unilaterally terminated the contract. Coca-Cola filed a case for the declaration of nullity of the unilateral termination with prayer for preliminary attachment. The RTC granted the writ and Pacific Sugar moved to dissolve. And in dissolving the writ, instead of filing a counter bond, Pacific Sugar filed a letter of credit, an LC. The Supreme Court said that a standby letter of credit cannot be considered as a substitute for a counter bond in a preliminary attachment. The Supreme Court went on to discuss the purposes of the issuance of the attachment. First, it takes hold of the property of a debtor prior to promulgation to prevent depletion or loss. Second, it subjects the property to payment to the creditor, assuming a favorable decision is met. The writ aims to create a lien on the property of a debtor as security until judgment is obtained. Okay? First, placing the property in the custody of the court, and creating a lien on the property to secure the satisfaction of judgment. The law limits the modes by which an attachment can be discharged. First is the posting of a cash bond or a counter bond. Second, proving that the attachment was improperly or irregularly issued or the bond is insufficient. Third is proving that the attachment was excessive. The law does not state that an attachment may be discharged through the submission of a standby letter of credit. By allowing the filing of a standby letter of credit instead of a counterbond, the trial court sanctioned a remedy not contemplated in the law. The courts cannot, in exercising its power of interpretation, supplant what is written in the law. To do so would be tantamount to judicial legislation. So by dissolving the writ of attachment, the trial court deprived the petitioner of security on specific property already earmarked for the satisfaction of judgment. We now go to the case of UEM Mara versus We. In this case, we filed a complaint for collection of sum of money with prayer for preliminary attachment against UEM. The remedy of preliminary attachment may be obtained at the commencement of the action or at any time before entry of judgment. This means that a preliminary attachment writ ceases to exist upon entry of judgment in the proceeding where it was issued. So the remedy of attachment is adjunct to the main suit. Therefore, it can have no independent existence apart from a suit on a claim of the plaintiff against the defendant. Remember, attachment is merely a provisional remedy. It can have no independent existence apart from the main action. So if the main action is already terminated by the issuance of a judgment and the judgment already becomes final, okay, the attachment the writ of preliminary attachment necessarily ceases to be valid. Not only did this court dispose of the case with finality, it also decided the case in favor of UEM. Consequently, the preliminary attachment ceased to exist, not only because of the final adjudication, but also because it has lost basis in view of the absolution from liability of the person to which it was directed. We have the case of TL2 Shipping versus Hanjin. Due to violation of an agency agreement, TL2 filed a case for collection of sum of money and damages with prayer for preliminary attachment against Hanjin. The RTC granted the writ. Respondent argued that petitioner's action for collection was one in personam, which required jurisdiction over the person of the defendant. Remember that a case for collection sum of money is an action in persona. Okay? In an action in persona, it is required that jurisdiction over the person of the defendant is acquired. Okay? How do you acquire jurisdiction over the person of the defendant? You serve summons. Okay? Because in an action per persona, it is a personal action binding the defendant to do a certain act. Okay? That is why jurisdiction over his person is necessary. In actions in personam, jurisdiction over the person is necessary for the court to hear and decide the case and may be acquired through the service of summons. However, the rule on prior or contemporaneous service of summons does not apply in the following cases, where the summons could not be served personally or by substituted service despite diligent efforts, where the defendant is a resident of the Philippines temporarily absent, or the defendant is a non-resident of the Philippines, or the action is one in rem or quasi in rem. In such cases, the levy on attachment is justified even if there was no prior or contemporaneous service of summons. So in this case, the Supreme Court ruled that the Court of Appeals erred in holding that jurisdiction over the person of the respondent was required before the writ of preliminary attachment can be implemented. In case the defendant does not reside and is not found in the Philippines, which is one of the grounds for the issuance of an attachment under Section 1 of Rule 57, the remedy is for the court to acquire jurisdiction to try the case by converting the action to one in rem or quasi in rem, by attaching the property of the defendant. The service of summons is no longer for the purpose of acquiring jurisdiction, but for compliance with the requirement of due process. So, the remedy, if for example, your case is one in personam, like collection for sum of money, okay, what do? You convert it to one in rem or quasi in rem. How do you convert it? Okay, you convert it by attaching the property, okay, which is the subject of the litigation. Okay, in which case, like for example, by applying for writ of preliminary attachment, the issuance of the writ will place the property under the custody of the court. So jurisdiction over the property has already been obtained. So if you have converted the action to one in rem or quasi in rem, then it is no longer necessary to acquire jurisdiction over the person of the defendant for the purpose of having jurisdiction over the case. The service of summons to the defendant is only for the purpose of compliance with the requirements of due process. Jurisdiction over the person of the defendant is not required in actions in rem or quasi in rem, provided that jurisdiction over the rest is acquired, either by the seizure of the property under legal process or as a result of the institution of legal proceedings. Respondent is undoubtedly a non-resident and a non-resident foreign corporation which cannot be found in the Philippines. Hence, personal and substituted service cannot be effected. Thus, in order for the court to properly acquire jurisdiction, petitioner moved to attach the properties of the respondent in the Philippines. Accordingly, respondent's properties were successfully attached. Necessarily, jurisdiction over the rest was acquired. So that's it for writ of preliminary attachment. Thank you for listening.